Today we're going to be looking at what are similarities or where does design thinking and systems thinking merge, mix and match. So we're going to looking at these two disciplines which are quite useful for developing products and solutions, and why it's becoming increasingly important to understand how these two, what they do, how do they interconnect and so on. So first of all, we will look at systems thinking. So now that we have the pandemic that's going on all around the COVID-19. So in view of this, typically, if you were to figure out that systems thinking, so if you take an example of, there is some pandemic outbreak that has happened let us say in some part of the city. Yeah, and that part of the city has the most number of cases that are reported as opposed to the rest of the city. So why are people reporting maximum number of cases in that part of the city? So probably that's where if you analyze deep down, so it looks like the tip of the iceberg, and then you can go down. Okay, that is the problem which reported, and then deep down the problem are certain indicators as to why it is happening in that part of the city, and then you figure out that a lot of people are mingling in that part of the city. They're not taking enough precautions, and perhaps they don't have enough sanitizers in that area, and perhaps it's a relatively economically impoverished area, so they don't have access to the best of the facilities and the masks and all of that sanitizing equipment. So given this fact, it could so happen that that is the reason why you see an increased number of cases in that part of the city. And then further down, if you go and see that, okay, maybe it's because what are the kind of structures that's there? How is the municipality functioning? So are people, do they have enough rules and regulations? So does it have enough policing? So the number of police per population in that area, what is it? Number of health workers per person in that area, what is the ratios? And if you take into all of these things, then you will come down to the processes and the structures that are resulting in this observed phenomena. And then further down, if you go down, you see that, okay, what is the vision and mission of the municipality deep down? What do they really want to achieve as an objective? So do they have some clear goals as to what they really want to do, and how do they want to manage the pandemic, and so on? So basically that comes next. And then finally it all boils down to, okay, what is the mental model that they have in terms of the long-term thinking, that what is the envisaged model that they want to have. So basically what looked like a symptomatic problem at the surface level, when you deep down analyze it, you will actually find out that there are multiple complex layers which have resulted in that observed phenomena. So typically, if you don't take a systems thinking approach, it would be like a cause and effect. Okay, here are some people who are fallen sick, treat them, and you finish with that. So that's not how you should be looking at it. You should be looking at the problem in its entirety. So basically, you've got to sell a product and a solution. So what are the markets that it's being positioned into? What is the value chain? What is the revenue structure that the product is doing? And what other products does this coexist in? What is the business environment? What is the technology environment in it? What is the customer maturity levels in terms of accepting this product, and what is the market value proposition, and what real customer pain points are you solving? So you need to look at all of those factors, and the problem could be customized in certain geographies in a certain way, so you need to look at that. So systems thinking is about those things. So there is a nice model that you can use. So I'll put up that picture here, which is going to help you to figure out how to understand and dissect the various underlying parts of the systems thinking approach. So this is the systems thinking thing, which looks at the overall big picture of how you want to solve it, and so on. So design thinking comes when you're actually in an exploration mode, when you're hunting for solutions. So it is typically a bottoms up approach. It's a kind of a collaborative approach. It requires people to get involved and then help you out with figuring out, what are the parts of the solution which are going to work, and what are the different ways in which you can actually solve the problem. So sometimes formulating the problem in a certain way itself can lead to different solutions. So you need to figure out how that really happens. So once you do a design thinking approach, you might be able to get a prototype, of a particular solution. So the objective would be to see, okay, this prototype is going to work. How does it going to fit into the overall big system? So that's when you hand it over to the thinking people, and then they look as to how to position this into the overall big framework of the landscape, IT, or the business landscape of the customer or the end user who's actually buying that product. The Cynefin model by Dave Snowden actually helps you to figure this out in a nice way, as to when teams are struggling as to, okay, when is that when do you need to use a design thinking approach, and when not to use it, for instance. So in one of the workshops that I did recently, people asked this question, okay, can we use this to solve any problem, each and every problem, or is it only for specific problems and all that? So systems thinking approach here is actually used for solving big, hairy, wicked problems, as they're called. So big, hairy, wicked problems are things like global warming, for instance, the population density in a certain area, the pandemic that's there, the outbreak of the pandemic in certain geographies, for instance, town planning, smart cities planning, and you want to do innovation and improvement in a certain area in any industry, and so on. So basically, it could be used in multiple ways and forms wherein you need a collaborative, human-centric approach. So basically, you design solutions in such a way that it's going to make life easy or better for the human beings who are, you empathize with your people. So you don't have to be a great designer to actually do design thinking. So but design thinking is not the way it looks, it is about the way it actually works. So that's a fundamental difference that needs to be known. And Dave Kelly, the head of IDEO, he made this remarkable statement: I got into design thinking because I love empathizing with people, and not because I'm a great designer. So you could get lots of UX, UI, graphic designers, or people who can make it aesthetically, make it look better. But the fact that he got into design thinking was because of the fact that he loved empathizing with people and trying to find problems for wicked problems. So if you look at the Cynefin model, you've got simple problems, you've got complicated problems, you've got complex problems, and you've got the chaotic problems. So that's a quadrant that'll be put up here. So simple problems are, okay, if X happens, do Y. So basically, somebody has swiped a card and he's not got the payment card loyalty points credited in an e-commerce gateway, for instance. So that's a simple problem. Perhaps there's some issue with the messaging gateway or things like that that needs to be debugged and solved. A slightly more complicated problem would be the fact that you're trying to do a recursion on some algorithm and trying to find the fastest search given stack of numbers. And then there's some algorithmic complexity involved in figuring out what is the best way to search the set of numbers from a pool of an array of numbers and so on. So if you have got those kind of algorithmic complexity or something that requires some amount of analysis and then thinking behind it, and so that will fall into the complicated bucket. And then comes the complex situation. So the complex ones could be, you are actually trying to figure out, what is the real problem all about. So you need to figure out how do you fix this problem in the first place. So you are not sure about the problem itself. So it could be facts like things like in an insurance industry, so there is money laundering that has happened, and money laundering has gone through multiple chains in the network, and then it is changed multiple hands. So that requires a lot of probing and then figuring out what needs to be done. So first you need to probe, and then you need to do the sense, and then you need to do the acting. So basically, if it's a case of people who've siphoned off funds using bad insurance, then underwriters come into picture here, and they'll help you figure out what is the trail chain of the events that led to this particular insurance case being filed, and whether that person really deserves to be given the insurance. So such complex problems fall into that bucket where probing is needed, and you need to backtrace a set of events to figure out what really happened. And then comes the chaotic stuff. So the chaotic stuff could be why did September 11 happen, for instance? So what are the different types of issues that are plaguing the world, which are quite complex in nature because of the past history of certain events that have happened in that place. Why is there enmity between two nations, and what was the geographical background between them, and so on. So those kind of things will actually come into the chaotic thing. So chaotic is, okay, sometimes it's so bad that, for instance, if you look at September 11, first what you need is you need a fix there, and then you do the rest of the analysis. And so you need to put the fire down and then do all of your other planning later. So that requires that kind of a mindset. So if you are into fixing or firefighting and fixing the problem, first you need to act, then you need to take stock of it, and then actually you need to respond and then figure out what was the underlying problem. So if you fall into that kind of a domain, then it is the chaotic section. So design thinking can actually help you in solving problems when they get to the complex and the chaotic parts, where you need a lot of stakeholders to contribute their heads, and then in a collaborative fashion you can actually look at human-centric ways of figuring out the solutions to long-standing wicked problems, as they are called. So systems thinking is typically the step that comes after the design thinking, wherein you prototyped a particular solution, but now you're trying to push that solution or trying to fit that solution in the overall big scheme of things in your process landscape, in your architecture, or in your product solutions. So that's how you actually have the mix and match of design thinking and systems thinking, so which will help people to create better products and so on. So thanks for watching. So this is a short take on these two subjects. Thank you very much.